The story begins with some warriors raiding a super sketchy dungeon filled with monsters. One guy tells his teammates that the demons will be angry with them, so they must get out fast. If they stick around for even a second, they'll end up facing certain death. The monsters are furious and ready to wipe out the overworlders who wrecked their sanctuary, while the warriors are panicking as they know the demons' rampage will catch up to them. When the explosions begin, one guy stands up like a hero and tries to hold back the wave of demons coming their way with one request for his teammates, that if they survive this mess, they should write him a biography. Seo Munyab is a dude who totally puts himself on the line to keep humanity safe. Since the beginning of time, people have no idea they are not the only ones on Earth, and a whole other society of powerful creatures lives beneath the surface called the Underworld. One day, the Underworlders break through the barriers and attack humans, which puts their entire existence at risk, as they have powerful supernatural abilities, and even military strikes fail to make a difference. The hardship doesn't stick around for humans too long. Some magical forces out there end up waking up their hidden superpowers. The few lucky superhumans level up like Batman to Superman with some awesome powers. Now it's time for humans to take on those ugly underground creeps. People start tearing down their dungeons, and a glimmer of hope begins to shine. In the spring of 2005, the Korean Justice League, made up of the 7 most powerful superhumans, comes together to take on the last dungeon gate. This team of 7 enters the final dungeon, which is the main hub of the underworld, and in the end, they win the never-ending war. They become the 7 war heroes and achieve enormous wealth and fame. But Seo, their leader who prefers death over the disgrace of running, doesn't make it back. The warriors who make it through are celebrated as stars. Even the late Seo earns a legendary tribute, which leads to a huge statue being built in honor of the fallen war hero. 17 years pass, and today is the day of the Battlefield National Representative Game match. South Korea is going up against France at the National Battlefield Arena in Seoul. At the start of the game, things are pretty intense, with the Korean warriors struggling to keep up. It's a one-man show with Nathan Bernard from France dominating the scene, taking out 6 Korean players all by himself. The hosts are shocked that the Battlefield League hasn't produced a player as lethal as this one who's already sitting in the top 3 of the Superhuman ranks. Hyeon is the only female player left, and she is seen as Korea's last shot at taking down Nathan Bernard. She also has some serious credentials, as she is the daughter of one of Korea's 7 legendary war heroes, Jaeho. As Hyeon charges at Nathan with her whip, she goes for a powerful slashing attack, but Nathan dodges it easily. He defeats her after disassembling her weapon and eliminates the final Korean player, bringing the combat to a close. South Korea is getting totally wiped out in a brutal match against France, failing to score even a single point while France racks up an impressive 11-point lead. All over the country, people are feeling down as the once great heroes who saved humanity now face the tough reality of their loss. It seems like the coaching from Jaeho, a former superhero from the war, is not helping much. Unfortunately, the countries that gave us the heroes Seo and Jaeho are struggling. Their team's performance has really fired up social media, with everyone supporting Hyeon since she always brings her game. Meanwhile, Jaeho, who has watched his team suffer from 3 straight losses under his coaching, can't help but think that the Korean superhumans just don't have what it takes and have let everyone down. The compatible ones have retired from divinity or sacrificed themselves long ago. Jaeho walks into the coach waiting room and lets out a big sigh. He glances at a picture of Seo and thinks it would be great if his friend was still around. Just then, a young kid knocks on the door and tells him the press is waiting, curious about what's happening. Jaeho replies that he needs to apologize to the country today because his team just does not have what it takes. After this, he cannot continue as a coach anymore. The boy insists, but has decided not to change his stance unless Seo returns to life or a miracle happens, as his reputation is now at risk. Not long after, he gets a call from the association president and asks if he has heard the news. Jaeho responds dryly, saying it's probably because their national team totally let them down with that brutal loss. The president gets some news that completely changes the look on the war hero's face, and his eyes widen when he hears it. It's all about the square, where those 3 legendary statues stand. Someone came crashing down from the sky onto Seo's statue. This person had armor on and looked like the figure he had just smashed into when he landed. The news that totally shocks Jaeho is that Seo comes back to life. When Seo gives himself up to save his friend, he sees the world's gates closing and a bunch of monsters gather. With these waves of creepy underworld creatures coming at him, Seo stands with determination as he gets ready to fight till the end. The scene shifts to the present when Seo slowly opens his eyes in the hospital room. The nurse starts explaining, but he's stunned to find out he is awake in 2022. His memories stopped back in 2005 during that dungeon raid, and he's completely blown away, realizing time just zoomed by without him. It's like time played a joke on him, The nurse sees the guy is confused and urges him to turn on the TV for the latest news to help him understand the situation. The breaking news reveals that Seo, who everyone thought was dead, has reappeared as the leader of the 7 heroes after being gone for 17 years. He is currently getting treatment at the hospital but came back to Earth in one piece without any serious injuries. Experts speculate that this whole thing might be linked to some weird changes in spacetime. SEO can't believe it's been 17 years since the dungeon raid. It feels like just a few days ago. Outside the hospital window, many reporters and journalists are trying to catch a glimpse of him, and some people never change. He feels a bit weird when he looks at himself in the mirror because despite being 47, he still looks the same. It's a lot to take in, especially considering he has survived all those crazy time and space mix-ups over the years. Then it hits him the most important thing in his life: money. The nurse explains that just like he hoped his cash helped out a bunch of needy kids, his house is now a museum and his old car was sold off as a fancy antique. As the nurse's words sink in, Seo can't help but feel down and hopeless. It's tough for him to wrap his head around that only a few days have passed since he left, and everything around him has changed. Noticing his worried look, the nurse reassures him that nobody will leave him behind because he is the one who saved the world. She also mentions that Mr. Jaeho got in touch after hearing the news and plans to visit soon. SEO is really fascinated by everything happening and tells Jaeho he wants to hear more details later. But first, he decides to check out how his body's doing with his awesome power, Eye of Analysis. This ability lets him see and grasp other living beings' skills and capabilities, making him the strongest superhuman. It shows not only current active skills, but also uncovers any hidden potential. Thanks to his amazing skills, he ended up leading dungeon raids while he was still pretty young. When Jaeho asked Seo to be his student, Muniob was a bit skeptical about Jaeho's strength at first. But after seeing Jaeho in action, he realized just how much potential the kid had, which eventually helped Jaeho become one of the 7 heroes. Then Seo looks at his stats, and most of them are already maxed out except for one. His willpower is off the charts. He is surprised to discover that he had acquired a new skill of immortality, which means he cannot die from anything physical. He figures he must have gained this skill during a battle that happened 17 years ago. Heian suddenly appears in his room, which was a big twist. Jaeho looks at him with a mix of uncertainty on his face, and tears start to well up in his eyes. Muniob grins at his friend and says he's kind of weaker now. He then adds that everything in the world is peaceful. Both friends head up to the hospital roof. Muniob playfully asks Jaeho if he's still crying. Jaeho smích a rozhovor o tom, jak se zdá, že slzy více tekou, jak se život rozvíjí. Muniob totally understands what he's saying. Muniob then asks Jaeho if he stuck to his plan about the biography. Jaeho nods and shares that he found a well-known ghostwriter who usually writes fantasy stuff. This ghostwriter has even made a name in documentaries and a popular movie. Listening to Jaeho's updates, Seo can't help but marvel at how much the world has changed over the past 17 years. As he takes in the sights, he comments on the impressive infrastructure and joking around. He tells Jaeho that even after saving the whole world, he still feels broke and without a place to call home. Jaeho shows his support during this tough time. Muniob smiles friendlily and asks how he is doing financially. Jaeho shares that he struck it rich after the dungeon raid. Muniob teases Jaeho for still holding on to his money by calling him silly. Jaeho just shrugs it off and says he's got pros managing it for him in a business, but Muniob continues poking fun at Jaeho for not having a job. Jaeho then explains he's actually busy like being the head coach for the national team. He pulls out his phone and tells Seo to watch a video. It's all the highlights from the Battlefield World Cup, but Muniob just sees it as the Olympics for Avengers in dungeons they've already cleared. Jaeho tells him about a virtual reality game where players battle it in a fake arena. He urges him to see it as a superhuman sport since it's losing its shine with the peaceful world. To Muniob, it sounds like a kid's game, but Jaeho pushes back saying there are some seriously skilled players out there who could go toe-to-toe with the 7 heroes. He points out that the World Cup has become a big deal for national pride. Muniob gets what Jaeho's saying and thinks about South Korea's situation. His question surprises Jaeho, and Muniob asks again in a sarcastic tone, implying that the country probably has plenty of tough players who could easily crush these little games. Jaeho shares with a heavy heart that South Korea is at the bottom of the international rankings. When Muniob hears this, he is completely taken aback by the fact that the truth is way worse than he ever expected. When a great evil disappears, it is often because another has risen to take its place. These are wise words from their master Jaeho. Muniob asks him to explain, and Jaeho replies that South Korea has once again fallen on the battlefield. SEO seeks further details, So Jaeho explains that many superheroes faced financial struggles after the war ended as they had no place to go. They had no idea when the jobless superheroes might turn on their bosses, so they came up with this lame game called Battlefield to protect themselves. Now Muniob finally understands why all those powerful Korean superheroes from back in the day ended up becoming coaches and players over time. People tried to take advantage of the superheroes for their own benefit. Jaeho points out that Seo, known as the king of trash talking, has been exposing them from the beginning and ensuring their plans failed. However, Koreans did not have a strong start, so the player levels have not come close to top-tier level. As soon as Jaeho suggests that he wants Muniob to join the game, Seo instantly rejects the idea. He accuses Jaeho of trying to make him compete in the Battlefield games to show off his skills. Seo has no interest in any of that and only wants to live a regular life now that his hero days are over in the final dungeon. Jaeho continues to insist that it is just for fun and nothing serious. Seo tells Jaeho that he will not fight for anyone else. He explains that he has been battling to survive and gain recognition since he became superhuman. Now he is ready to leave all of that behind and focus on what is best for him. He also mentions how dealing with the press has been a constant hassle because they keep publishing ridiculous headlines to flatter people. Seo firmly rejects Jaeho's offer, and surprisingly, they are both fine with it. Then, he spots a billboard saying that not all superhumans are total failures these days. He stares at a model on a billboard, and just as he gets lost in his thoughts, he realizes that the model is Jaeho's daughter. The last time Seo saw her, she was 6 years old, and now she is 23. After making some playful comments that create an awkward vibe, Seo starts talking about random topics to ease the tension. Jaeho interrupts him and assures him that everything is fine. They arrive at Jaeho's house and are warmly greeted by his wife, who appears much younger than her age. Seo suddenly realizes that he is alive again while watching a couple having a conversation. He had expected to return to a world without dungeons or battles, just an ordinary life with boring games and boomers. Now he is faced with the challenges of regular life, including being unemployed. He decides to embrace the hermit lifestyle and stay at home doing nothing at all. This idea feels like the ultimate dream for many teenagers. He plans to binge-watch reruns of his favorite drama, which has 17 years' worth of episodes waiting for him. Jaeho is surprised to learn that Seo just wants to relax. He is followed by reporters and paparazzi trying to get a glimpse of him. The next day, Seo decides to face the reporters in one spot. He thinks he can easily ignore them like a middle school crush and focuses on his next moves. At the press conference, he tells everyone to fire their questions at him, because he is ready to regain his peace. Despite his intensity, they continuously bombard him with questions one after another. One reporter decides to get a bit nosy, trying to stir things up about Seo possibly joining Battlefield as a player. Although he clearly says no, the reporter pushes further by suggesting he might be scared of failing and calling him a snowflake. Seo responds with his usual sharp wit, pointing out his shiny head from his thinning hair and putting that talk to rest. He adds that Battlefield doesn't seem fun to him at all, which is why he's not interested in joining. He wraps up the conference, telling everyone not to bother him again. Just when he thinks he's off the hook, another reporter calls out for a question. The reporter mentions that player Gerald Walker called the 7 heroes a bunch of weaklings who could never lay a finger on him. He asks Seo what he thinks about that, leaving him completely speechless. The reporter then fills Seo in on the top 3 players in the world: Nathan Bernard from France, Roy Meyer from Ireland, and Daniel Mansky from Germany. Noticing Walker's name missing from the list, Seo can't help but laugh and roast him. He openly dares Walker to face him in real life if he thinks he is so tough. Seo even says he will personally beat him up with his own 2 hands and bury him in the dirt. In the USA, Zachary Wood, the US Battlefield Agency player, and Walker watched the live broadcast closely and quickly arranged a flight to Korea. The competition between the two is definitely heating up. Early in the morning, Jaeho receives an unexpected call about an A match with the USA. He looks completely stressed out and worn down, showing how serious the situation is. Muniob feels annoyed about being involved but perks up when Jaeho mentions that the match is 2 weeks away. The whole mess started because Seo ended up provoking the wrong person. Walker is furious after being publicly humiliated and is determined to get revenge. Since Seo does not participate in Battlefield, Walker plans to restore his pride by defeating the Korean team. His goal is to take them out one by one, seeing them as no match for his strength. Seo admits he's a pretty weird, probably just trying to boost his fragile ego. He wonders if Haeyeon is at the national team game, since she is part of the squad. Just then, Haeyeon bursts into the house and asks her mom where Seo is before rushing over. She jumps onto him and gives him a big hug. Seo warns her that she is getting stronger, and she should be careful because who knows what might happen to him. She tells him that she will never forget him, because he used to bring her chocolate and cookies when she was a kid, especially when he asks if she remembers him. He then asks if she is there for the A match, but she says no, and that she is actually there to see Seo. She also tries to find out if he likes Battlefield, but he just brushes it off and says he is not interested. True to his nature, he sticks to his opinion and does not change his mind. She keeps pushing him to change his answer, but it's not working. They blame each other for not being the same as before. Faking a sad vibe, she steps back and tries to guilt-trip him, but he counters that he was only interested as long as the chocolates were involved. She asks him to accompany her for the avatar check at the association. He would rather finish his drama, but Haeyeon's puppy eyes make it difficult for him to refuse. So he finally decides to go with her and asks where they're headed. Haeyeon just smirks and says he'll find out soon enough. They arrive at the Korea Battlefield Association. After getting her avatar check done, she jumps into this crazy contraption and gets teleported into the battlefield arena. She tells them to summon a monster so she can fight against SEO. The operator then gives Muniob the lowdown on how this is all a virtual reality sport. They're recreating dungeons, monsters, and players in VR, which is why newbies have to get their avatars set up at the association. With that, he starts watching Haeyeon play. She shows off some serious skills taking down the wolf monster and finishes it up quickly. Once she's done, she jumps back to the real world and asks Seo how she did. He teases her by still calling her a 6-year-old, but she points out that she's basically stuck in a child's mindset. She challenges him to give it a try, but he backs out. Haeyeon insists that she really wants to see what he can do since she can't remember any of the fights he had against the underworld. He takes a deep breath and decides to give it a shot. He quickly sets up his avatar through the connection module, then he gets his weapons. They are a bit on the heavy side, but feel pretty manageable for his build. So, armed with a spear and shield, he steps into the battlefield, almost like Hercules. Seo hops into the system and finds himself in a spot that looks like the testing area. Everything around him is running smoothly, so he takes a moment to warm up. He is up against a dungeon creature called Salarbun, a powerful starfish stored in the system. This thing is no joke since it can only be hurt by aura attacks, and physical hits won't do a thing. When Salarbun goes on the offensive, Seo casually tosses his spear aside as if he's just out for a stroll in the woods. Seo gets ready to attack with a flick of his finger and takes out the monster in no time, but he stays totally chill about it. Both the instructor and Haeyeon cannot believe what they just saw. Seo tells the instructor to bring in another mob because he wants to see how things go. He is checking out the monsters here which look like the real thing. While the summoning happens, someone with an external module hops into the system and drops his hideous self into the fight. Out of nowhere, Walker crashes into the module, reminding everyone that his battle invite from earlier is still on. SEO has nothing to say because talking to a guy who is just venting is a waste of time. Walker accuses him of being scared and possibly wetting his pants. He storms towards Seo, shouting that his whole reputation is just a fake show. He swings his blade at our hero, but Seo easily dodges and casually mentions that he's been thinking about how tough this test is. And just like that, the showdown begins. Many people enter the testing area, including Jae-ho and a woman who helped Walker join the test. It turns out that everything was planned in advance. Park Jin-tae, the president of the Korean Battlefield Association, openly flirts with the woman beside him, Gerald Walker's manager. Jin-tae is hopeful that our hero will embrace the battlefield vibe, which could be a win-win for both of them. The action heats up as Parker and our hero go head-to-head. He looks at that big Walker and figures out he's built for tanking. They take a breather from the fighting for a moment. Our hero thinks about the guy's strength, which is built for tanking. Then he remembers that new power he learned in the hospital, so he decides to use it against Parker. Our hero charges at full speed toward Parker and stops right before him. Parker attacks while our hero is frozen in place and sends him flying backwards. Even Parker seems surprised by his own actions, as if he was trying to show off a hint of his masochistic side. Our hero quickly gets back up and strikes Parker again instantly. He could have been in danger since he made no effort to defend himself against the projectile our hero launched. That is what happens when someone lets their guard down mid-fight against an elite warrior. He grins at Parker due to his immortality trait, which means he can't be killed by anything physical. If surviving is an art, he is definitely the Picasso of it. Our hero just dropped a bombshell, saying that he is actually immortal. Parker seems shocked. Then, our hero explains that he got this immortality after nearly dying in the last dungeon. Now he has a serious edge over his weaker opponents. Our hero tells the controller to tone him down to make it fair. He asks for his immortality to be sealed in the game. With that power locked away, he figures that since Walker is such a crybaby, this will make things even if he loses to someone who can't be beaten. They argue with our hero, claiming he is way stronger than people think. Walker passes him a spear, and they decide to keep going. Being savage, our hero challenges Walker to take out the top 3 first before even thinking about him who is at the top. And since Walker isn't even in that elite group, he is just loud and full of himself. Walker gets even more irritated as our hero keeps talking. In a flash, Walker charges at him, and they start fighting back. Just when things heat up, Walker suddenly stops as our hero vanishes. He reappears right behind Walker and tries to strike him, but Walker barely manages to dodge it. Our hero praises him for his quick reflexes but decides it's time to end this. He powers up his spear and hurls it at Walker. Walker blocks the attack, but you can tell he is getting frustrated and shaking like a leaf in a storm. All this power totally flustered Walker. Suddenly, a knight enters proudly, claiming victory. Walker rejects that idea, but our hero quickly reminds him that he will never beat our hero. His defeat is totally unavoidable. Out of nowhere, our hero suggests that Walker switch to a smaller shield. He claims it would help him move better and won't block his view. Walker wonders if our hero is just messing with him, but our hero insists he's serious. Walker accepts the advice and asks for a rematch in 2 weeks. He gives the bearded guy a hard time, saying he's not really into this game because he has a lot of dramas to watch. Still, Walker is set on that rematch. He promises that next time will be a different story. But honestly, he is so caught up in his loss that he can't see straight, and his stubbornness is through the roof. Everyone around them is stunned, but Jintei thinks teaming up with our hero on the battlefield will ultimately pay off. While chilling at home and catching up on TV, he gets hit with the news that our hero might reconsider his stance on playing Battlefield after that recent showdown with Walker. Apparently, he could join a friendly match between Korea and the USA if the USA team does not lose against Korea in their upcoming game. The report mentions that our hero has agreed to all these terms. Watching the news, he is taken aback, realizing that everybody has set him up really well, and now he is stuck in this mess with no clear way out. Our hero storms into the room at the Korea Battlefield Association and confronts Jintei. He asks who started the rumors about his entrance into the battlefield. He is super angry and ready to blow up at any moment. On top of that, someone leaked a video with all the parts where he declined his offer edited out just like some evidence presented in court. All this frustrates him, and he says that he will definitely find whoever did this and probably skin them alive. In the middle of all this, Jintei steps up and gives a genuine apology as the president. But considering what is going on, he didn't have much choice. He looked pretty helpless, stuck in front of the stronger American Battlefield Association. Jintei stops him and suggests a genius idea to escape the awful coffin filled with blood-sucking bugs he is stuck in. He suggests that a friendly match will only happen if the American team crushes the Korean side without any casualties. He reassures our hero that it's fine for the Korean team to take out a few players to mess with the friendly. His peaceful days are gone, and he's frustrated and unconcerned. Jintei points out that since our hero is super strong, dodging this mess is a tough nut to crack. Then he decides to play the guilt card on our hero, saying they have been friends forever, and that he should give him this one last solid for old time's sake. Like a kid making big promises, Jintei swears he will donate all the profits to his favorite child protection charities. At this point, our hero is so annoyed he could punch Park in the face, and that would feel pretty satisfying. But because of the debt he owes Jintei, he hesitantly agrees to go along with it, just this once. When Jintei tries to cozy up to him, but our hero pushes him away. Our hero asks again about the conditions. If even one American dies in an official match, he won't have to continue. Jintei assures him, and they decide to grab dinner. Meanwhile, Jintei reviews the past scorecards, which shows that Korea has been wiped out in every match with no American casualties at all. Back at the Jeho house, our hero checks the news only to see headlines announcing he's accepted the proposal and might enter the battlefield soon. Naturally, this just makes his blood boil even more. All of this is really getting on our hero's nerves. He just wants to chill and watch some dramas in peace. He blames Jin-tae for all this chaos and can't say he is wrong. He steps outside and spots Haeyeon training her heart out, moving like a gazelle at full speed. Even though she is quick, Jaeho is on her case, telling her to pick up the pace and train harder like a typical dad, loading her with advice from every angle. Our hero watches Haeyeon and notices some things are off while other aspects are all right in her stats. Our hero storms in like a nosy relative and tells everyone to stop the training. Haeyeon's already at her limit with dexterity. Even though she's a speed type, the father-daughter duo is different, and he is not training her correctly. He discovers she is not the right choice for a sub-dealer position. What worked for Jaeho will not work for Haeyeon. When he asks her what she'd do after catching someone with a whip, she answers, but our hero says she's off base. She needs to land a hit herself instead. Trying out different styles or listening to other methods is pointless for her, so she will be their Grim Reaper by wielding a sword. Our hero shows how it's done by grabbing the opponent with a whip and cutting them right through. Since she cannot kill anyone with just the whip, she must build her strength and master sword techniques. From now on, she'll take on the melee dealer role. This kicks off some intense training. There are now 500 sets of strength training exercises. From now until the match, our hero will be coaching Haeyeon to nail down their game plan. Agent and manager John Kim is impressed with Walker's progress at the USA Nation Team Training Center. With the new gear, he has finally tackled his biggest weakness. Now he is on the path to gaining some serious power and could crack the top 3 pretty soon. Still, he needs a lot more practice to deal with different opponents. Walker, who also plays for money, wants to know how much his net worth might increase with this change. The estimate is that he could make at least $10 million. So he sends that amount to our hero as consultation fees, and our hero jokingly thinks that Bill Gates might as well be his dad. It is finally the day of the big match, which is way more important than El Clasico. Korea is set to take on the USA at the International Battlefield Stadium. Everyone is buzzing about the result, especially since it could lead to a crazier showdown later. The announcer initially introduces the players from both teams. The American uniforms look like they borrow from Captain America, while the Koreans rock some wild cowboy vibes, and everyone's got their eyes on Jaeho Haeyeon after she switched up her position. The match kicks off in the decrepit underworld castle, guarded by skeletons. The Palace of Borny has 3 levels, and a boss is waiting at the end of each floor. On the first level, there is a skeleton warrior followed by a death knight, and on the top floor you find a bone dragon and a lich. There are 3 main rules in the game. First, you win by defeating all your enemies. Second, each enemy you defeat gives you a haunting point. Third, collecting more haunting points earns your team a bonus-colored aura. The players are starting to come in. The American team is slashing through the first-level skeletons like they're nothing. Meanwhile, the Korean team avoids those skeletons and goes straight for the boss. They're hatching a risky plan to take him out first to rack up some points, which could throw the American team off their game too. Now, the Korean team is up against this tall, skinny skeleton warrior. The boss battle is officially on. The American team is getting a bit worried since the Koreans are already going after the boss with their unique strategy. They rush to join the fight, and the slow walker needs some help from a teammate to get there in time. Haeyeon is finally about to land the finishing blow. Walker storms in using his teammate's tempest power to fly. He slams into her midair and sends her flying far away, resulting in her death. Walker praises their strategy but still has to act smug about it. He claims the outcome was always in their favor. He has a huge ego as the American team arrives and defeats the skeleton warrior. After that, it turns into a total disaster for the Korean team. They are picked off one by one. With the loss of their boss and everything stolen, they face total humiliation, and they should just give up now. And the USA ends the first set flawlessly with no deaths on their side. The Korean team, especially Haeyeon, is feeling really frustrated because she learns directly from Seo himself. In the locker room, Seo gathers everyone and points out areas where they need to improve. Their skills are not up to par, and they panic during the game. They have not won a single match so far, and losing like this is embarrassing. Seo dives straight into a game plan to deal with Walker and remove him from the picture for good. In the locker room, Seo reminds everyone about how he and Jin-tae used to raid the Borny. It was not easy, but taking down the enemies on level 3 required some guts and steel balls. Looking at this group who cannot even win a single match, it is almost funny to think they could ever make it that far. He praises their plan to go straight for the boss, but that only works if they can execute it properly with guidance at every step. The frontline attackers rush in without checking what the enemy team is doing. Scouting is just as important as attacking, but these clueless idiots just do not understand it. The backline should have taken cover when the frontline was being wiped out like ants. Instead, they stood there like statues and got themselves killed. Nobody here seems to have any common sense to figure it out. SEO feels bad for Jaeho having to deal with this mess of a team. SEO begins explaining strategy for the second set. Now it is time to move on to the second round. This time, the American team tries something new by splitting into two groups with a tactic called the G5 formation. The quick-footed players take on the job of securing the area, while the cleanup crew, which includes Walker, focuses on controlling the hunting grounds. The plan is meant to bring out the best in the team's unique skills. Meanwhile, the Korean team returns to their running strategy like in the first match. However, Haeyeon changes positions and seems to aim for a more aggressive and exciting approach instead of their usual game plan. The American scouting team quickly notices the shift that the Koreans are preparing for a late-game strategy. Walker remains overly confident and full of energy about their chances of winning. He is especially eager to face Seo and try out a new style. A beam of light breaks through behind them as if a big revelation is about to unfold. The Koreans smash through a wall and charge straight at the Americans. The unexpected attack leaves the Americans completely stunned, and the scene shifts to a tense advisory session. SEO lays out the game plan for everyone in the locker room. He tells the team to focus on scouting and assigns Haeyeon to take charge of that task. If Walker's group has fewer than 5 people, he instructs them to attack without hesitation. He describes Borneo as a place with narrow one-way streets and reveals that the underworlds have created secret passages with warp points. The plan is for all 11 of them to use these passages split into 2 teams and launch a full-scale attack on the Americans. They are determined to settle the score this time. Seo also advises targeting Walker's legs, which are more vulnerable due to his switch to a smaller shield. Although there is uncertainty about whether this approach will work, it is their best chance to win. The Americans may lose as they face many challenges. All the Koreans have to do is believe in the strategy and charge in like bull. The Korean attack kicks off, and they rush forward like they have some kind of wild spirit. Just as the Americans are trying to sort out their formation, the Koreans strike. Haeyeon teleports in with her team, quickly taking out the 2 support characters while Walker's already racked up 3 kills. But Walker, caught up in the moment like a lovesick teenager, decides to go on the offensive. The showdown between Walker and Haeyeon begins. After some clever moves, Haeyeon manages to catch his leg with her whip and cuts it off completely. It seems the underdogs have finally grown stronger. Although they were the weaker team, the ambush proved successful. Walker is left helpless on the ground with his leg gone and watches as Haeyeon approaches him. He assumes she must have learned some tricks directly from Seo. Haeyeon does not bother to respond. She finishes him off without hesitation. With Walker defeated, the Korean team achieves the impossible. SEO feels proud as his student secures the ultimate victory over Walker. The Korean team looks much better than they used to when they needed help. But despite all their hard work, the USA team is still ahead. Even as a smaller team, they pulled off 5 kills against the Americans, which is no small feat. One of the standout moments was when they broke through the wall. Haeyeon is really stepping up as a leader in this situation. In an interview, Coach Jaeho notes how their attitude improves, even though they lose. He mentions that this experience is valuable for them moving forward. When it comes to the ambush tactic, Seo, who is pretty much an expert in these dungeons, was there to help out. He was a bit agitated because Jaeho wanted to bring him into the game too. Then there is Haeyeon, who credits all their success to her uncle's training Seo. He helps her get stronger and even suggests a change in her position. Seo is still frustrated about being mentioned by that father-daughter duo on live TV. Out of nowhere, Jintae shows up and taunts him about how he always gets angry when embarrassed. Jintae pushes him to do the interview since he is the president, but Seo prefers to stay hidden and out of sight. Seo asks Jintae why he is here, and then he replies that it's all just a reminder of the past. Only a few people know about the hidden path in the dungeon, so that secret will go to the grave with them. Then, Seo proudly declares that he came up with the strategy for the second set. It might feel like cheating, but considering the situation, it seems like the best call. He really wants to avoid playing that awful friend of his, so he figures this strategy is a safer bet. SEO does not like this game, and Jintai also mentions how he is training Hyon, and she's finally starting to find her rhythm. Jintai is really into seeing Seo in action and thinks it would be a waste if he did not jump into battlefield, so he pushes him again to make better use of his talent and not let it go to waste. SEO brings up the bet he won in Jintai's office, but Jintai cuts him off with one last question. He talks about the upcoming Korean Battlefield Pro League season and wants to set up a charity game with some well-known players. He truly wants Seo to join in at the very least. Seo gives a vague answer, which Jintai takes as a win. Jintai is shocked, and Seo promises to think about it, especially after seeing Hyun's impressive performance. He is even considering dropping a few dramas to spend time on Battlefield for once. With all the dungeons gone, fighting here is pretty much all that's left, so he has this urge to fight again. Jintai then shows Seo that their match video got over 10 million views in just an hour, with crazy comments praising their skills. Seo reminds him that he has not said yes yet, so Jintai needs to chill. But Seo brings up the Pro League starting soon and thinks this charity match popping up at the last minute seems a bit sketchy. Jintai quietly brushes off that idea. Seo lays down some conditions for his participation, and before he even finishes, Jintai agrees to everything. Seo smirks and hopes it's nothing too wild. Meanwhile, Jaeho is confused about what is happening at the Jaeho residence. Seo just shrugs it off, saying that since Jintai accepted his requests, he will be a special guest for the charity match. Looks like he is getting MVP treatment all around. At first, his plan for this second chance at life, just to binge-watch dramas and take it easy. Now, it is time to get to work. As a complete narcissist, he is certain his opponents do not stand a chance. He can probably take them down without even trying. Seo joins the action, but Jaeho questions his participation in matches and training. Seo replies that there is only one person he wants to beat for fun, and that person is Jaeho. Jaeho is unhappy about this and tells him to take it easy with the violence. It has been 17 years since he put down his weapons. Seo sees that Jaeho has definitely lost some strength. Still, the old guy can get his stats back up with enough effort. It is time for him to shake off the rust and get back in shape. Starting tomorrow, they are diving into non-stop training sessions until who knows when. Jaeho looks pretty pale after hearing that. He knows he's in for it. Meanwhile, Jintai recalls Seo's 2 conditions in his office and aims to team up with Haeyeon and Jaeho for this gig. It will also catch the eye of the sponsors, which is a bonus. Jintai calls all the news outlets, and the next day's headlines scream that the 2 stars of the Korean Justice League are finally teaming up after 17 years. And just like that, the countdown begins for the big charity event on the 7th day. Jaeho irritates Seo during their training session with his silly mistakes and sloppy technique. Seo pushes Jaeho to step it up and get faster, but it is hard to expect much from someone who has gone through a lot. Then Jaeho charges at Seo, and even though he swings, Seo easily blocks him. He insists his skills are still solid, but reminds him he used to be even better back in the day. Jaeho struggles to keep up due to his age. Seo taunts him that this warm-up would have been easy in the old days, even after 8 hours of training. Jaeho ends up begging Seo for a break. Seo stresses that he could not care less since he has to catch up on his drama after this session. Jaeho yells that he is still the same and needs rest because he is older. The old guy finally admits that he feels pretty lazy. Then Jaeho points out that Seo has plans too, so he'll miss his drama anyway. Later, Seo meets with Yoo Hyun-soo, the engineering team leader from the Korean Battlefield Association, to go through his avatar test. For today's test, someone from the World Association, Brown Tenor, is in charge of everything. Seo mentions that the last time he played, he took down the Salarbun and defeated Walker. So, is it still necessary to do it? But Yoo tells him that his avatar is still without its athletic ability measurements, which are needed to know if problems exist when initiating an avatar. Since the avatar is like a perfect copy of all the player's abilities, it can even mimic a player's unawakened powers. There are a bunch of mysteries surrounding the battlefield system, and Seo imagines they might be copying the underground civilization. He wonders if maybe there is an underworld group backing the World Association. Yoo thinks Seo has lost a few marbles, which is why he is wandering about all this weirdness. Now it is time for the testing to kick off. First, they need to check his strength, dexterity, and aura stats to find the best sync rate. Seo really needs to step up his game. He begins with the strength test, in which he has to pull this handle 3 times for a solid reading. To To everyone's surprise, Seo, who often brags about his strength, turns out to be just average. Then comes the dexterity test, in which he has to push switches on both ends of the room until he gets the stop signal, and he totally crushes it with some impressive dexterity. He takes the test again and scores higher. He asks about Nathan's top score, comparing him to Jeho in his prime, and finds Nathan interesting. He takes a third round at the dexterity test and manages to tie Nathan's score, both of them ending up with 1,007 points. Even Seo cannot believe it as he feels he is pushing himself harder than he should. So, he decides to try the strength test again. He seems a bit too confident, or maybe just very hopeful. He zones in again and grabs the handle. To everyone's surprise, he pulls way more than last time. With his focus on a point, he is showing off powers that seem to go beyond the limit, like Superman or something. Deep down, he knows his actual powers have not really changed. He cannot shake this weird sense of déjà vu, which reminds him of when he was alone in that last dungeon and managed to stay super focused even when facing death. It is always like this when he is nearly pushed to the limit. His willpower seems to be the only thing that breaks through what humans think is possible. His ego comes out again as he brags that he does not even need to fight, and now his willpower and immortality are unbeatable. Now it's time for the third test, which measures his aura. He has to put his hand on this orb and push out as much aura as possible to make it change color. They mention it is a big deal when it comes to spotting rising prospects to tell the gems apart from the junk. After awakening, Seo's aura is already pretty high, but he is still pushing to make it even higher. At this point, his aura capacity is maxed out. He is basically holding the record for the highest aura stat ever seen by mankind, leaving everyone stunned and jaws dropped. Seo officially sets the record for the highest aura stats in human history. He is bragging about it, acting like it is no big deal. Classic Seo. The previous record was held by his teammate Sharan. He cannot help but insult and compliment her at the same time like some kind of jealous bully. They used to mess around a lot back in the day. Then Yu tells him he cannot use his immortality in the match since it would make it unfair to the other teams and basically guarantee a win for his team. Looks like his trick to win at life won't be allowed now. Yu apologizes for limiting his abilities and promises the association will compensate him, but Seo could not care less and gladly takes the money. Meanwhile, there is a weird group of people, basically a knockoff Ku Klux Klan cult, worshipping Seo as their protector. They believe he is their savior, acting like a Jesus figure and chanting his name since he is immortal and returned from the dead. Seo walks by and gets annoyed by these weirdos. Jeho tells him it's the Seo Moon Foundation, a pseudo-cult that treats him like a god. Seo remembers that these people were outside his hospital, trying to grab his attention. These idiots think that when the world ends, Seo will rise again and save the chosen ones. They are basically calling for the world to be destroyed, which is classic cult behavior. Seo is determined to teach them a lesson and walks off while Jeho tries to stop him. He jumps in front of the cult group and tells them to be quiet. He lets them know that he gets their worship vibe, but firmly tells those jobless pillowcases to get a life for once. If this cult leader runs into Seo himself, he is done for, especially for creating such an annoying group. Even the noise of toddlers cannot compete with these guys. The cultists start going off because Seo rejects them, but they figure he's just testing their faith, so they keep chanting his name like loyal followers. This ticks off Seo, and he gives them a 10-second countdown to shut it, or he will make their lives miserable in ways they cannot imagine. A few minutes later, he is standing on a heap of beaten up that looks like a pile of junk. Seo stands on top of that mound, making it clear that none of these cultists are going to follow him like crazy fangirls ever again. Once that drama ends, he hops down and heads back to Jeho. He is ready to jump back into training. Jeho cannot help but say he is definitely the craziest person he knows, which is totally true because this dude is off the wall. There is no point in talking now, since reporters could show up any minute, but Seo plans to face the reporters himself. American battlefield agent Joe Pellman steps out of Incheon International Airport. He is in Korea because of SEO and the buzz around his participation in the match. The nostalgia of going back to Korea is really hitting him hard. He looks back on the old days and gives a shout-out to the Korean Superhuman from 17 years ago. Thanks to them, he is now the top battlefield agent in the USA. Joe's eyeing Jake Land, the European battlefield agent, who is also a superhuman. Jake gives Joe a hard time about playing fair this time. They're staring each other down, looking like two girls fighting over the same guy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the airport, the Moreau brothers, Jean and Philip, the club owner of the Paris Lumiere Battlefield Club, are making their entrance look like something out of a dungeon. They get straight to the point, claiming that the guy who ruined their dungeon business has now appeared in Battlefield. Even though he is not planning to play, he still made his move, and they are determined not to let Seo slip away. The moment Sharan walks in, the entire airport goes silent. She's like Marilyn Monroe in the Manhwa world, known as the untouchable of the continent, the walking tactics machine and the youngest of the 7 heroes. Outside the stadium, the crowd is massive. Some people are actually glad that others died during the war, or else this rush would be way worse. The guy saying this without a hint of guilt is our charming hero, the foul-mouthed Seo Munyab. Seo and Jaeho exit the car, and the crowd cheers for the revived hero. Jaeho can't help but wonder how this brat manages to get so much attention, as it's a head-scratcher. The interviewers and reporters rush toward them like starving animals, spotting a meal. To save himself from the onslaught, Jaeho gives Seo a little push. He bombarded with questions and feels overwhelmed. He can only think about his intense dislike for Baek Jaeho through all this chaos. While he craves the spotlight, such situation irritate him. Then someone brings up Sharan, who's also coming to watch the game. Enough to make her cry like a little baby, even if she didn't know Korean back then. Seo worries she might unleash her extinction ray on him for revenge and wipe him off the planet. After spending 17 years together, she might have let go of their old grudge. But Seo is still the same as before, so she could plot something. Time for another backstory moment. Sharan is originally from China and is one of the 7 heroes picked to take on the final dungeon. She grew up as a spoiled rich kid with some serious superpowers, so the government kept her really protected. But honestly, she's always been a huge crybaby because she has low willpower. Seo Munyab used to roast her a lot and put her down constantly. He made comparisons that were just cruel, even though Sharan was a bit slow. It really got tough for her sometimes. Haeyeon jokes that she'll pray for Seo if he has another funeral, but Jaeho cuts that off, saying they must move on to something more important. Jaeho starts talking to everyone about the rules and then brings up Seo, who's about to play his first game ever. So, he goes over how the game will work. There will be 2 teams, including the Love team with national representatives. The Hope team will have regular players, except for Baek Haeyeon. The Hope team has their coach, Baek Jaeho, joining them as the melee dealer. He's unsure about his skills, but Hope team leader Park Chulho reassures him they will all put in extra effort. Meanwhile, our blunt hero roll his eyes knowing Haeyeon is miles ahead of the competition while the rest are not on her level. Seo is sizing everyone up. He notices Choi Hyuk has impressive stats and thinks he'd make a solid tank. Since Hyuk's got Aura's focus and strong durability, Seo brings him over. When Seo introduces himself as the melee dealer for the Sangsung Spirits, he's annoyed about not being used as a tank. Hyuk admits he'd love to be a tank, but his small frame holds him back. He mentions that he can channel his aura into weapons instead. Height classism is a real struggle here. Seo puts the blame on the team coach for Hyuk's current position. Even though he's got tank potential, he's stuck being a dealer. Seo tells Hyuk to grab a shield, and he mimes it using a tray, showing him how to use one. When Hyuk tries to push back, Seo cuts him off, insisting he follow orders. Seo's power trip is back in action. The crowd is stunned, realizing the rumors about Seo being a bit of a weirdo are pretty much true. He's just switched up someone's role right after meeting them. They don't know he's actually a genius beneath all that craziness. In the end, nobody pays attention to Hyuk as they all comically ignore him. It leaves him feeling like he's been abandoned. Once they wrap up the roles, everyone starts putting on their armor. The armor feels light and tough, just like the ones from back in the war. Jaeho is a bit awkward putting this uniform on again after 17 years. It'll take him a bit to return to his fierce fighting mode. The weapons they made for Seo are the same ones he originally used, but with a few tweaks. Jaeho tells him to chill out and not be such a cocky narcissist. Even though he knows Seo's strong, his opponents are pros at fighting against humans, so Seo needs to stay sharp. They might not have much experience, but they can sometimes create problems. He grins and gives a thumbs up, telling Baek Jaeho to handle their seasoned juniors. The teams line up to hit the arena, the crowd going wild. Seo checks out everyone's skills, only to notice that even though the national team has higher average scores, none have special abilities. They seem pretty average and dull. Keeping that in mind, he asks about Jaeho's picks. Jaeho explains how they score the players based on a bunch of factors. SEO then zeroes in on Shim Yong-soo, who has decent stats but terrible willpower. Seo figures it's another rich kid syndrome case, just like Shuran. Shim rudely calls Seo an old man and has given him a hard time since the beginning. So, Seo shifts over and stands beside the brat for a little verbal showdown that is classic bully versus bully move. He criticizes the kid, saying he has some complaints about him. Shim scoffs and claims he has lots of complaints too, especially since Seo is self-centered. Seo notices that without ever playing Battlefield, Shim's attitude just doesn't add up. The kid is a total troublemaker who could use some discipline. When Seo asks him about his dad, Shim casually mentions that he is the association's vice president. He snaps back and questions what kind of dad raises such a clueless and spoiled brat like him. Growing up in a modest middle-class life, Seo has always had an issue with pampered kids like that. Thanks to the brat, he is fired up and ready to hop onto the battlefield, fueled by serious determination. It is time to jump in and give it his all in the game with everything he has.